followed by Senator Booker. Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Ms. Monica, Ms. Gupta, congratulations on your nominations. I know that you and your family and friends should be proud. Ms. Gupta, also, I know that some of my colleagues on my side of the aisle have asked you a number of different questions about positions you've taken on Twitter or in public statements. I'm only going to refer to one of those and then move on to a few more questions. I hope that you understand that the department that you're being considered for is one of the few departments in the administration that we're striving our best to have people go forward who are do not necessarily have a partisan background, and I think we can infer from some of your statements that you may, and not necessarily take offense to it. Just understand, I think the motivation is to create leadership in the DOJ that are as unbiased as possible in matters of policy. But I do have to ask you a question about a tweet that you posted February of last year. I believe it was February the 20th. It read, "Please understand what Senate Majority Leader at the time, Mitch McConnell, is prioritizing this week. He's moving forward on 2 partisan anti-abortion bills and more lifetime federal judges instead of holding votes on all of the important civil and human rights legislation already passed by the House." And you ended it by saying, "We won't forget." Ms. Gupta, do you recall what the 2 anti-abortion bills were that we were pursuing that week?
Senator, I do not, sorry.
Well, we were voting on Senator Graham's Pain-Capable Unborn Children Protection Act and Senator Sass's Born Alive Protection Survivor Act. One required doctors to provide medical care to any child that was born alive after an attempted abortion, and the other one makes it a criminal offense for a doctor to perform an abortion 20 weeks after fertilization. And in fact, these bills were bipartisan. We got a couple of Democrat votes on them. So I'm just curious, before I move on to DOJ policies, why, in your mind, you don't think a doctor should provide medical care to a child who has been born alive?
Senator, the issue here, I think, and I seem to recall that we were gravely concerned that there were hundreds of bills that were held up in the Senate that had been passed by the House and that were not receiving even a hearing. And the concern was that there was swift movement on confirmation of judges, but the holdup of these bills was of great concern to many of us, and I was giving voice to that. It doesn't mean to diminish the bills that you were considering, but we were expressing a lot of concern about the hundreds of bills that were being held up or not receiving a hearing in the Senate.
I'd like to move on to some things that will be closer should you be confirmed. On qualified immunity, you've advocated for the elimination of what I believe you've referred to as judge-made doctrine of qualified immunity. Do you believe Congress should replace it with protections for law enforcement officers who have to make very difficult, oftentimes split-second decisions in dangerous circumstances? Is that something that Congress should act on?
I believe that it is really important that law enforcement is able to do their important jobs of maintaining public safety. I think the issue around how to hold individual officers accountable for misconduct is one that is really important, and these were a set of questions asked after George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis. These were questions that I believe members of this committee were asking and have been, I know, and will be considering again in the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. But I also think they are very challenging. There isn't an easy answer for this. We have to be able to ensure that law enforcement can do their jobs and also be able to ensure individual accountability when misconduct occurs. And
I agree with accountability, but I also have a concern that if we make this job more difficult, we've already made it unattractive by the way that many in law enforcement have been demonized or are accused of being systemically racist. We need to deal with situations, legitimate situations, but I think that we could be going down a dangerous path if we make this job even more dangerous and make it more likely fewer people will enter the law enforcement profession. You mentioned George Floyd. I'm sure you're well aware of the case that's proceeding there. I was this morning seeing a news report around the perimeter of the courthouse, and if I'm not mistaken, it was 2 Jersey Turnpike barriers with fences erected and razor wire in between. It would suggest to me that depending upon the outcome of that case, that they're anticipating civil unrest. So do you believe that the First Amendment right protects people who could potentially breach that building regardless of what the outcome is, a protest on either side? Do you believe that First Amendment protections ever extend to people who destroy buildings, who assault people? Do you believe the Department of Justice should pursue them without any whiff whatsoever of what side of the argument they may be on?
The answer to your last question is yes, absolutely. Violence is never appropriate. The First Amendment only protects peaceful protest. And I do think that the Justice Department will have to, in that type of situation, were that to occur, the Justice Department has to enforce the law and protect communities from violence, whether it's in the course of a protest or not, regardless of who is engaged in it.
And we got a report from the FBI director last week that's some 300 arrests have been made. I, for one, hope that there are thousands more coming. But I also asked the question about continuing to focus on those who perpetrated crimes, damaged buildings, harmed people, hundreds of law enforcement officers. Do you feel like there should be equal weight on investigating, arresting, and convicting anyone over the past year of violence that we've seen, almost unprecedented violence in this country? Do you intend to emphasize that anyone who harms someone, who damages a building, who harms a law enforcement officer should be pursued regardless of what their underlying protest was based on?
Yes.
I've got a couple of other questions. I guess I've got 12 seconds. I just want to try and understand something that you said about reducing the footprint of police and law enforcement. You know, a cynic would say that's a more eloquent way of saying defunding the police. What is different between reducing the footprint of the police and the criminal legal system and defunding the police? What's the distinction there I need to understand?
Thank you for raising that. So as I've said before, and I will say it again, I don't support defunding the police. The difference is that I have worked throughout my career with conservative leaders and with progressives and libertarians to ensure that there isn't government overreach through our criminal justice system, which has caused enormous harm on communities of color through low-level enforcement measures that have been very disparate in communities. And that where we can refocus on violent crime and ensure that there's availability of things like community-based treatment and mental health treatment, that we should be supporting that as a set of societal priorities. I have also been very clear that I have advocated for greater police resources. And as I said, I know President Biden has committed $300 million more to the COPS office. I will look forward to implementing those funds if the COPS office receives them. I believe that constitutional community-oriented policing is crucial to supporting both law enforcement and the communities that they serve. And if confirmed as Associate Attorney General, I'd be very committed to doing so.
Thank you. Thank Ms. Gupta and Ms. Monaco. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Booker?